And I want to thank everyone for being here. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jessica Leichtweisz. I'm the CEO of Hope Education Services. And I am very humbled to be here every week because the truth is that this is not about me. It's not about me at all. I've been working with kids with autism. It'll be 13 years in September, which makes me feel really, really old. But the reality of it is that I've learned how to teach your child how to communicate. I've learned how to help your child with behaviors. I've learned all about different sensory inputs. But the truth is that I can't tell you what it's like to be autistic because I don't identify as autistic. And only someone who's living with autism can truly understand what it's like to have autism, what it's like to be autistic, and adequately communicate how that affects their life. So this is the part of my brand, my business, where I humbly bow out and I default to these amazing and incredible people who generously give every week. Nothing, like they just give. This is just they're just volunteers. We don't make money from this. I don't charge the parents who are here to be part of this and ask their questions. I don't make anything from it. I actually pay to be able to host this. I pay for the softwares. And all the panelists humbly come and give their time every week to get parents' questions answered. Because our goal, our mission as a group, as a panel, is that the world that we live in will be better for children with autism today than it was when we were kids. Because the truth is the more that we know, the more that we learn, the more that we accept, the better the world becomes. So I just wanted to humbly thank everyone for being here. So Rich, we already are recording. I know that Rich is on here tonight and he's asking if he can ask a question. You're welcome to jump out and ask a question, but we are in recording mode. So any parents that are on here, I know we have Joe, we have Lisa, we have Rich on here tonight. If anyone wants to jump out and ask a question, this is your chance to ask the panelists whatever is on your mind.
Hey, so I'll introduce myself and I'll show myself afterwards just to kind of remain a little anonymous because I'm not sure who watches these videos. But everybody, my name is Rich, panelist. I'll show you guys. I'll say hi prior. If you could just stay on like after, maybe, say hi to you guys. And I want to thank you all for your time, for coming. I'm a parent of a 2-year-old, about to be 3-year-old son who was just diagnosed on the spectrum last month and with high functioning autism, as they call it now. And I asked a question last week and you guys gave some great answers. Thank you all so much for your input. This week, I had a bit of a strange question. So the question is, growing up, my parents always taught me, I was raised in a pretty rough neighborhood, what most would consider urban nowadays. It was a very poverty-stricken area, what even some people call the hood. But we were taught to have tough skin. We were gonna hear bad things said to us, and we were told, well, my dad always told me, man up, along those lines. My mom always told me, hey, not everybody's going to be giving you hugs and kisses and everything. So how do I teach my son, not so much to toughen up, but to be prepared mentally for what's to come? And this question was based off a video I saw of Rachel. Rachel, I saw a video where you were explaining how somebody had, hey, what's up? Somebody had said something to you and the way you overcame it and, and you defied all odds. And I just wanted to know, what can I do when my son starts to communicate with me more and tells me, hey, Dad, somebody called me the R word today. How do I prepare him for these name calling and just pretty much to take a beat down when it comes down to a verbal beat down and how to take it? And what would you guys do in your case? Like, how would you cope with it now, even as adults? Because I'm sure you'll still find people they'll resort to name calling ad hominem attacks. What would you guys do?
Yeah, Rich, this is a great question. And, it's not uniquely for people who are autistic. For me, I was bullied a lot as a child. And I always felt like I couldn't fit in with everybody else. And I don't identify as autistic, but I always felt like socially, I just didn't fit in. I was the kid that was ahead in school, and that serves me very well as an adult because I can do a lot of great things. But I was so bored right when I was in grammar school that I was pulling apart my calculator and putting it back together as opposed to paying attention in math class. So I was getting in trouble with my teachers for not paying attention. And I was, bullied by children in the class that I couldn't relate to. So I can certainly understand what this is like. And this is an important question. So I want to thank you for asking it, because it's not really just or people who are autistic, bullying is a major problem, and it's a problem that extends into adulthood. You know, for me, I love working with kids with autism. I love what I do, and I'm really good at it. Like, I get connected to the kids at a level that a lot of people can't, and I understand them at a level that other people can, and I get great results. But the reality of it is for me, early on in my career, my hardest thing for me was actually interacting with parents, because I developed this idea that nobody liked me. And that perseverated in my family, it perseverated in my romantic relationships, it perseverated in my friendships. And so I always had this distance between me and other people. And it took years of work and years of healing to be able to break it down. So this is a fantastic question. And I think it's one that is more relevant today than even when any of us, the panelists, were all relatively in our between 25 and, other than Aidan, who's really young, he's not on here tonight, but maybe between like our 20s and 30s, you know, we didn't have cyberbullying. So when we went home, it was like a relatively safe space. But like today, kids are just connected all the time. And so kids are constantly bombarded with bullying. And, you know, developing a thick skin is really important. So since Rachel, I'm so glad you're here today. And I'm so glad that you're feeling well, that you're back with us. I was really, really excited to see you today. And since Rich had asked this question based upon your video, I know you faced a lot of bullying like I did as a child, and that was really painful. And if you can share for us in whatever level of vulnerability and detail you're willing to go into, what that was like for you of being bullied and how you overcame that, and any advice you can give Rich in preparing his son for that. Because the truth is that bullying happens, and it's not just to autistic kids, right? It's to any kid. Like, any kid can be a victim of bullying, and it's hard, and it can potentially have lifelong consequences. For me, I can't say that at 34 years old, I own a business. I've been on major television. I've been quoted by New York Times. I've been quoted by Forbes. I've been on national daytime television. I won a marathon, and I still don't see myself as like this powerful woman, because I still sometimes hear the bullies, and even in every day, and that's really hard. And so for someone who was bullied, I really do want to take this question seriously. So Rachel, what would if you can share, to whatever details you're willing to go into, a little bit about your story, for anyone who maybe didn't watch it. I know Rich does know your story, and I know your story, but for anyone who doesn't know it, if you can share it and kind of share how you got through it and what advice you'd give a child who's going through that now or potentially might go through that someday.
And those are some great points, because I know I've done a lot myself, but because of bullying, I still feel insecure. I still feel like I haven't done a lot either. So that really shows how much bullying can impact anyone. It's not just an autistic thing. But I love how you bring up that you want to tell your child to just be a strong person, because that's exactly what my parents told me to do. I was being bullied a lot at school, and my parents always told me to be strong, don't let them get to you, because that's just giving them the satisfaction. They won, and that just really, that impacted me. I didn't want to let my bullies win. I wanted to show them that I'm going to be the bigger person. I'm going to come out on top. And this is actually really funny, because one day when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, I told my bullies to shut up because they were bullying me so much, because I just got tired one day. But it doesn't have to come to that point. But I think that's very good advice that you're giving him, and I applaud you. But as for the R word, it really does have a long, long history, because it was used as a medical term. We were always called that because people thought there was something wrong with us, and people want to reclaim it as maybe something good, or we just want to ban it because it's bad. It's sort of a weird split, but in my opinion, I think that we need to learn to to just, as I don't know if anyone watches RuPaul's Drag Race, but they say that you need to take it and let it roll like water off a duck's back. You can't let things get to you, whether it be the R word or if it's somebody taking your seat in another class and you wanted to sit there, because there's always going to be forms of oppression and you need to be the bigger person.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, Rachel. But you know, it's still really hard because even as adults, like, I'm going to be honest, I don't remember the name of all of my bullies, but I was very much victimized as a child. And I don't associate it as autistic, but I've shared before that I have a neurological disorder, and that with that actually comes learning disabilities and social difficulties. And so while I've been able to overcome that to a large degree as an adult, through a child, I really did experience many of the same things that someone with autism would have gone through. And just this inability to feel like I fit in. And you know, you're right, like, it's being the bigger person. But I also, and I completely, like, I 100% agree with your advice. And if I was sitting with the younger version of myself, I would say to that person exactly what you said. Is it's okay, and it's like, be the bigger person and don't let them get to you. But I know, speaking firsthand, they did get to me. And like I said, and like you said, I mean, you've done incredible things. You have a beautiful singing voice. You've won pageants. Like, you're a published author. Whether within at least by tomorrow you will be. But I mean, it's like, you've done all these incredible things, and I know I've done all these incredible things. And sometimes in the back of your head, you still hear the voices of the bullies. And I think that, like, all of us think that it's unique to feel like we don't fit in, or unique to feel like we don't relate to people on a certain level, or unique to feel like we're fearing of being rejected. But the truth is, I think that's just part of being human. And I think it's something that all of us go through. And, you know, one of the things when we put out the book, This is Autism, one of the things that I really wanted to convey is that, yes, the struggles that autistic people face might be at a deeper level and might be at a different level because the world is set up for neurotypical people. But the truth is that the humanity within all of us, the little child in every single person, even through adulthood, oftentimes fears the same thing. You know, so it's like, it's being the bigger person. For me in my life and my journey, it's been easier said than done. And it's been years of healing for me. So, you know, Rachel, and I want to speak to you about this because I know you and I have had a very similar childhood in terms of experience of how we were treated by our peers. And, you know, I also want to learn from you, in addition to Rich. But, you know, I look back at it and I know what I did to get to where I am today. But I don't even know what I would say if I was speaking to that little girl who is being bullied. You know, other than eventually it'll get easier, eventually it'll stop. One day you'll be employing the people that were making fun of you, right? That's the reality. But the truth is, it's like, how do you get that person who's a child to understand that everything they're being told is not true? Because children do understand what you believe them, what you tell them, right? And I always tell parents it's important to build your child up. And that's one thing I didn't have from my parents, and one thing I didn't have from my teachers was building me up. And it's why today it's so important for me. Like, I tell my kids all the time, like, you're incredible, you're amazing. And it's just like, it's silly little things. Like, I was doing a game today with a 14-year-old I work with. He's autistic, and I was playing hangman with him. And I had, like, in the hangman game, I had him actually, like, I spelled out, like, you are amazing, but I put his name in there. And I had his name that said, like, you are amazing. I won't say his name for his privacy. And then he got so excited. His whole face, like, lit up. And he's like, no one's ever called me amazing before. And that made me so sad. Because the truth is, as parents, as teachers, we should be telling this kid he's amazing. And I take it on personally. Like, I've been working with this kid for 4 years, and I'm like, really? In 4 years, I never told you you're amazing? Because the truth is, I think this kid is amazing. I mean, he really is incredible. He's done things that I may never be able to do, and he's overcome things I've never had to. So, you know, what would you say, Rachel, if you were talking to the younger version of yourself? You know, how would you're an adult today and you've overcome and you've achieved, but what would you say to like the little Rachel? I call it like little J, you can call it little R. What would you call it to like the little Rachel that was sitting there and being bullied and victimized? What would you say to that person? Because I think that's what Rich needs to say to his son.
Well, I think it's absolutely important to tell kids that they're amazing or just anything positive. So I would tell myself that you are amazing, you will get through this, and everything's going to be okay. And that it doesn't matter if you're a little bit different, you're going to do wonderful things.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know, is that like we don't have to be defined by other people's opinions of us. And that's really their problem. When they think of us and they look at us and think of us as different, that's their problem. It's not our problem. But oftentimes we make it our problem and we don't have to. And that's the one thing I wish I never did, was made someone else's opinion of me my opinion of me. So, you know, for me, it's just having a child choose early on that someone else's opinion of you, it doesn't have to be your opinion of you. So I know, Jeff, you said you wrote about bullying and autism. Would you like to come out and share a little bit about what you wrote about? And if you're willing to share some personal testimonies, I don't know, personally, we haven't had that. We've spoken, but not at that level of whether or not you were bullied. But was that something you experienced as a child, or are you speaking about this in that firsthand perspective, or just giving advice to parents?
Well, first of all, I was never really bullied per se when I was a kid, but actually some of my friends who are also on the autism spectrum have actually been bullied. One of my close friends who I've known for almost 20 years now, she was actually bullied a lot through elementary school, through middle school, and all the way up into her freshman year of high school. And it's a major problem in our society. Bullying is a big problem, especially when it comes to not only going on in schools, but also in the workplace or even in immediate families. I mean, it's a major problem. And I've actually, if you guys were reading the group chat, I have created a Google Slides presentation about autism and bullying that I hope to eventually present at conferences and trainings whenever they're available, whether they're online or whether they're in person. And I think the important thing that what I need to do is, even though I wasn't a victim of bullying, again, a lot of my friends were on the autism spectrum, and it's a major problem that needs to be confronted. And Rich, I think that the one advice I can give to you from someone who's on the spectrum to an autism parent like you is just tell your son, you are stronger than what most people are. There's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with them. And if that's one thing that I will recommend that you hammer to him when he gets older. And then, I don't know if you've ever seen The Munsters, but there's a really famous quote from Herman Munster that it doesn't matter what you look like. What does matter is the strength of your character and the size of your heart.
Oh.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that. And you know, for me, like one of the things, Jeff, I'm relating to and even getting emotional about is when I was younger, I was bullied, told I was ugly. And, you know, it's still very hard for me to look in the mirror and believe that. And I actually started to like, I have this mirror and it sits on my desk. And like whenever I'm having this like wall kicking moment in business, whenever I'm afraid of like being successful, I look into the mirror and I tell myself like, you're beautiful and you're confident and you're successful. And that, and it's hard because like bullying, it doesn't just happen to a child. When we're children, and there's this idea in this in neurolinguistic programming, this idea that we believe most of our subconscious mind and the things we believe about ourselves into adulthood, it's the things we were told when we were children. The reality of it is like you can't stop the bullying from taking place. What I wish though was that when I went home and that my teachers told me something different and I had another story. Because, you know, for me as a child, I only ever had this one story, which is you're ugly, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not enough. And it's interesting, when I was in 7th grade, I actually came second in the state on a math competition. And I wound up literally, I wound up getting it, and I wound up taking my SATs when I was in 6th grade, and I got a National Junior Scholarship Award. I actually got over 1,200 when I was in 6th grade taking my SATs. And then when I was in sophomore in high school, I failed math. Like literally, I failed it. And this is someone who literally was recognized as like the top in the state in math just a few years before. I walked across the stage and I got an award that I still have today saying I was top in math. But then people told me that I wasn't smart, that I wasn't enough. And I believed it. And I believed it so much that it affected who I was. And it changed who I was. And not so much it changed who I was in my heart, but it changed who I was in my performance, in my belief about myself, and how I came across to other people. And I still can't say that I fully recovered from that. You know, it's a process, it's in a journey every day. But I think that for me, if I could go back and change anything, it would be I needed to hear someone else tell me something different. Because children want to believe they're amazing. Children will want to believe that they're awesome. And if they're just told one thing, and oftentimes when it comes to autistic people, society just has one label, like one thing, one outcome for someone who's autistic. And that's just not true. Everyone here is proof that that's just not true, right? And yes. The reality of it is if you were told different when you were a child, and I'm saying if I was told different as a child, I wonder if I would struggle today still, you know, with some of the things that I do. And there was no other voice. So for me, again, like I keep going back to this, is like children believe what you tell them. And the people that children are going to believe are the people they love and respect the most. If you're on here as a parent for your call, I mean, you are amazing. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're incredible. I mean, you are juggling so many things. Right now, like the world has never been through this type of circumstance. As a parent, you used to be able to send your kid to school. They used to get speech therapy there, occupational therapy there, physical therapy there. They had a guidance counselor. They had a school psychologist, and they went home and they had behavior therapy, and you had to take them to speech therapy after school. And like, granted, you were a taxi, but the reality of it is that you didn't have to play all those roles. And now you have to play all those roles, and you're still here for your kid. Your kid is gonna be so grateful for you for being here one day. And your child is so lucky to have you, whether you're like sitting here in bed and you're wondering, maybe you clicked on this video because this is your biggest fear and it's keeping you up at night. And you're like sitting in your bed and you're just watching this and you're crying, hearing our stories. And I just want to let you know, that that's you, my prayers are with you. And I want you to know that like your child is grateful for you. They really are, and they're lucky to have you. Be that other voice. You know, be that other voice. That's all your child needs. Your child doesn't need to toughen up. Your child needs to hear someone tell them that they're fantastic. Because if your child hears you're amazing, and then like the R word, or like you're incredible, or you suck, your child wants to believe they're incredible. That's just human nature. They want to believe the good things about themselves. the good will outweigh the bad. Light always wins. You know, light, and this is the one thing I think is amazing with this beautiful analogy, is that all the darkness in the world cannot defeat the light of one little candle. But one little candle can defeat all of darkness. It's impossible for darkness to win if one candle is lit. And all it takes for your child, it doesn't take for them to really, I think it doesn't take a thick skin. It takes one person to tell your child, you're incredible. You're going to be awesome one day. Your heart is so beautiful. You know, like Jeff said, your heart is bigger than anything else. And for me, when I look back at my success and even just this book we just put out, the acknowledgements, you know, I acknowledge 2 people by name in the book. And all of the panelists, of course, are there as well. But 2 people by name in the book. And these are the 2 people in my life who always told me, despite everything, you are amazing. You're going to do incredible things one day. And that's really what that's what I hold on to and grasp onto for me. So, you know, I want to just, this may not be a question for all of the panelists. So if you are on here, you're a panelist and you did experience bullying, I'm just going to ask you to unmute. I'm not going to call on people for this question. I know, like I said, Rich called you out, and Jeff, you had volunteered in the chat. I don't want to unmute all the panelists for this question, just call on you to give an answer. But whoever is here, if you've experienced bullying and you want to share your story and you want to share a recommendation, if you could just unmute and just talk and just let us know.
Here, I'll go. So with just, I could go as far back as to like with 3rd grade, because I was actually a new kid going into, I was in a specialized school from when I moved to New Jersey and everything, because at the time I was in a specialized school for students with autism and multiple disabilities. And then I'm coming back into my town school district, and I was very fortunate with a couple of friends that came up to me, but I had a classmate who wasn't really nice to me because they were like teasing me. They were like saying like horrible names to me and everything. And it just, you know, I'm talking with, like, this was also the time I was still learning with talking and everything, because I was like slowly becoming more verbal and everything. So my mom was able to tell from like my facial expressions and everything that like things were like not okay. So how we actually like learned through this experience is that my mom actually signed me up for Taekwondo. This is actually the reason, like the biggest reason why I was in Taekwondo, was because learning from experiences such as with bullying and everything, to learn to be a strong person in your own way, and to know that like that you are unique in your own way and everything. And unfortunately, like, yes, bullying, unfortunately, there are not nice people in the world. There isn't. Like, there's nice people and there's not nice people. That's just the reality of our world here. But I think it was that time, and then my freshman year of high school was when I've experienced it again, but it was through a friend. I've mentioned it, I think, like a few episodes ago or something like that, where I had a friend who went behind my back and she was spreading rumors about me, teasing me. She was threatening me with like words that like I still just, to this day, I cannot believe that anybody would be that harsh about it. But it's just that, you know what, I've learned eventually, like, and through my siblings, because I have 3 other siblings, that that, you know what, that I am unique in my own way, that they're just, they don't realize, like, I'm just have to be myself. They're being them, like themselves, and just, you know what, they're not living the same life as you are, and just with everything. And I still, to this day, like, I was a peer mentor for students with disabilities in high school, and I was trying to teach to the other classmates, which I was being more like a friend because I wanted to let them know that they're gonna have these experiences that they're gonna see, but there's always gonna be people there to support you and believe in you. And I know my parents always believed in me and everything, and always providing those positive affirmations and just like in everything, just like everybody else has been saying, like just keep saying like those positive like statements and everything, because it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. And you know, it's hard because as a kid, like I said, you believe what people tell you, and that's really what it comes down to. Is that when people talk about bullying and why it affects people into adulthood, I think it really just comes down to you believe what people tell you. And so if more people tell you you're awesome, that's what you'll believe. But Jesse, you put in the chat that you wanted to come out next and you wanted to chat, and you said you have an entire anti-bullying campaign. So I'd love to hear more about like what you have to share on this topic.
The thing is, I understand that others have had it much worse than myself, but at the same time, this does not change the fact that much of my childhood was incredibly sad. The bullying was just relentless, and it seemed like it would last forever. It was much worse during transitional periods. New schools and life phases almost always caused my problems with bullying to sort of merge with a vengeance. And as a result, even to this day, I've always despised and feared transitions because in my eyes, it's not an adventure. It's fixing what was working fine before or was at least stable and going through the misunderstandings all over again. I think it's good that you want to put your child in boxing. I think things are much better than they were during our childhood, Jessica, but at the same time, it's not perfect. And I have conversations with my younger self quite often. I want to tell the young Jesse that it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And quite frankly, the only way it will get better is if you practice punching someone in the face in the mirror and tell yourself, make a promise, next time someone attacks you for absolutely no reason, you're going to strike back just as hard and accept the consequences. The first time I experienced bullying and fought back was in 4th grade, and I got into quite a bit of trouble, to be honest. No one really cared that I was the one being attacked for no reason. And because I'm the way I am, it seemed like that's how it was for forever. You know, I did something wrong, I cannot fight back, and I'll get into trouble. So if I could do it over again, I would have realized that getting suspended and being yelled at by adults would be a lot better than what was to come for a long time. I want you to tell your child, though, Rich, that, as we said before, oftentimes it's something that's terribly wrong with the other person. And in the most horrific cases of bullying, there's oftentimes a mental illness that's partially at fault. Not that a mental illness excuses such behavior, and not all people with mental illnesses are bullies, but at the same time, in many people that does not help. For example, I have a litter collection campaign, and one time in my work, some woman started screaming at me and calling me an effing faggot for no reason and walking toward me. And I was thinking, I'm just picking up litter. What have I ever done to you? And that's the extent of some bullies. They're mentally ill. And also, so what I'm saying is don't take it personally. And I could go on forever about this, but what I want to give other people a chance. We can always talk later on. But my old hiking partner had this expression: whenever something really bad happens, the best way to prevent it from happening again and again is to just blame yourself. That does not mean that it's our fault when we're victimized, but at the same time, I think of certain people like poison ivy. They just take up space. They serve no purpose for mankind. They just cause suffering, but they do exist. We have to look at the signs. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bullying that occurs in adulthood, and we're totally defenseless, and the people do not face consequences, such as the catfishing schemes. And it's important to understand the red flags. For example, if someone who's a real jerk all the time suddenly acts like they're your child's best friend, Rich, then either that person has been taken over by a pod person from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or they have a hidden agenda. Nobody transforms into a decent person overnight. And that's what happened when I was cyberbullied for 6 months. The perpetrators, who were never kind to me, suddenly embraced me, and I was invited to this restaurant called the Daily Planet by one of them, as well as a woman I'd never met before posing as the fake girlfriend. So that should have been a major clue that something was terribly wrong. And also, unlike when we were growing up, Jessica, there's role models like myself and everyone on this panel who can let your child know that they have autism too, and it's not always going to be like this.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse, for sharing that. And, you bring up some really, really great points. But I think that it's important for all of us to, like I said, understand as adults. And I think like everyone's saying, it's our job to build children up. And Monica, you're putting in the chat that you're sharing with Rich. We're talking about like whether or not it's a good idea to teach children self-defense and teach them to fight back. And is it really fighting back, or is it really just believing in who they are and just being so confident in themselves that no one can hurt them? And that's what I wish I was. For me, I always say if I was a guy, I would be in fistfights all the time.
I think getting punched in the face is going to hurt whether you're confident or not.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess there's the bullying of defending yourself against physical bullying. As a woman, I never had to really think about like physical bullying. But so, what is your advice on this whole topic of bullying and should children be prepared to defend themselves? Should they be prepared to just be confident in who they are? What's your take on this?
I think both of those things are key. Like all character building things, turning kids into adults, it starts at home. So if you're teaching your kid that they have value and that they can set boundaries with their relationships and that they can advocate for themselves and they have the right to tell people no, adults, kids, you are in charge of your body and your choices. If you start with that, then you may be able to stay off of some of the more physical interventions. But if you've got a kid that just really wants to punch your kid in the face, then your kid needs to feel safe. So I'm not opposed to teaching self-defense. And I think someone said something about you never start the fight, but you finish it. That was our rule too. And I never finished a fight, and I never started a fight, but I got beat up a couple times. But I'm 5'10", and I'm the shortest in my family. So that speaks to our gigantuan size. So I had some kids punch me in the stomach, punch me in the face, but I would literally just grab their head and shove them, and then they're on the floor. So I didn't really need like intensive tactical skills because I was just bigger. So that worked to my benefit. Another thing I wanted to say is when I was a kid, bullying wasn't a thing that was like bullying happened. I got beat up. I just told you I got beat up, and I got made fun of, and I didn't fit, and kids ran away from me. And I also thought that kids were really stupid. Like, and when you're in grade 2 and all the kids are making fart jokes, I'm like, that's not even funny. Like, that's not funny at all. Like, come up with something better. Like, I didn't like kids. So then if I did want to engage with kids, they're like, nah, you're weird. And they would run away. And so all of that sucked, but it was never discussed as bullying. Like, that wasn't a thing. It was teasing. And if you're crying about teasing, then either you need to toughen up because you got to stop crying about it, or there's something wrong with you that you're being teased. Like, you're either being teased for a reason or you're too sensitive, was kind of how that went. So either way, it was your fault if you were the odd kid out, and you needed to learn to blend better. And then like physical fights, that also wasn't like bullying. That was, you got in a fight because that's what kids do. You get mad at each other and you get in a fight and then you move on. Maybe this is Canada culture. Maybe this is my family culture. But this is also like 22 to 20 or 22 to 15 years ago. So we didn't have like pink shirt anti-bullying campaigns. But all of that to say that I think it's important to label those types of interactions as completely unjustified, because I felt like I was a wimp and they're just teasing me and I'm being too sensitive, or I'm doing something wrong that's making me worthy of being made fun of. So I think what would have been more important for me was to understand the value in being different and being validated in who I was, instead of toughen up or fit in.
Yeah, I agree with that, Monica. So I have to say, I definitely never like ended a fight, and I never lost a fight. I did start a few fights when I was a child. And you know, for me, I was like this tomboy, and I grew up amongst a lot of boys, and it was like I was very tough. But you know, the thing about it is I was never physically bullied. I did probably start a few fights when I was a child, but I was never physically bullied. But I wound up believing the voices of bullies and bullying myself. And like, even to the point that I remember as a child, like sticking, because I was in so much emotional pain from the bullying that I experienced, just like sticking safety pins in my skin and wanting to like physically manifest external suffering because of what I was feeling on the inside. So sometimes like our worst critics are actually ourselves. And it's like you said, it's like I never needed anyone to tell me to be tougher. Because honestly, I could have beaten the crap out of any single one of my bullies. Like people are in the chat talking about like karate and taekwondo. I did karate once as a child, and I was thrown out of the studio because like it was like non-contact karate, and I was like maybe like 6 or 7 years old, and there was like this 10-year-old that accidentally kicked me. And then I like beat the living daylights out of him and he didn't even do it on purpose. And I remember being kicked out of the studio, and they were like, she's too aggressive. I mean, and to this day, it's like, I mean, I have a 90-pound pit bull and very big on personal protection in my home. So it's like, I'm still the person you don't want to mess with, but that doesn't mean that I didn't do damage to myself as a child. So it's like you said, it's oftentimes like not being tough. It's not needing to be like told or taught to toughen up. I feel like you just naturally toughen up. You like naturally, like that's just kind of like your reaction. It's like actually being gentle to yourself and believing in yourself and loving yourself. That's what needs to be taught. At least for me, and it may not be everyone's experience, for me it's like the natural reaction to toughen up, right? Fight or flight is like a biological reaction. It's one that humans don't need to be taught. So humans will learn to have thick skin. But oftentimes when you do that, you repress your heart and you repress your emotions. And for me, I didn't even realize I had a big heart until I was in my 30s, because I had literally just repressed it all. And it took
Right.
people telling me, like, you're a beautiful person, you have a big heart, to even know that or see that and believe it and then begin to feel it. And I wouldn't even say I'm done with my journey. I would say I'm in the beginning or middle of my journey of like healing. But it's like, and I keep reiterating the same thing. It's like, I didn't need to be taught to defend myself. I didn't need to be taught to toughen up. I'm the wrong person to mess with. Like, I always had muscle. I've never been this super feminine person. But I did need to be told, like, you're loved and you're beautiful and that you're exactly perfect as you are. Because that's something that I never heard.
Yeah, I've grown up with big brothers, so I didn't need help being tougher. I needed someone to tell me it was okay to be soft.
Yeah, I get that as well. Because the problem is when, like, you're taught to be really, really tough, oftentimes the person you're toughest with is yourself.
Yes.
And you're often your worst critic, and you become your biggest bully.
And
So
then you're bullying your own body.
Yeah, exactly. And for many of us, I think many people who are willing to admit it will admit that we've even physically bullied ourselves.
Yep.
Whether it's like sitting in front of a mirror, punching yourself in the stomach, which I know some of my mentors talk about doing that, or like, for me, I know I have friends that cut themselves, and like, if you look at their wrists, it looks like they tried to commit suicide, but they never really did. It was manifesting the pain. Or for me, it was like using safety pins so that way, like, I could hide it. Because like with safety pins, no one can notice it. Because like, I would feel the pain and I would know what I was doing, but then it would heal by the morning, right? So I think oftentimes it's just like, it's okay to hurt. It's okay. That to me is more important. Yeah, and Jesse's saying he's hit himself too, and he's saying Jesse said it's more common than people think in the autism population. I think I would actually like qualify that to say it's more common in the entire population. It's more common for everyone, and everyone is willing to talk about and admit and be comfortable with. It's the harsh reality of like, really, I think what we as children were taught of like being tough. There's only so tough you can be, but sometimes being tough just means don't show your pain, and whatever's repressed is going to be expressed in some way, whether that's violence towards others or violence towards yourself. Eventually it's going to come out. And for me, that's how it came out then, and then it came out as self-sabotage later in my adult life, and it came out as drinking later in my adult life. And today it's being even just okay with feeling is hard and uncomfortable. I'm not comfortable with feeling today pain in any way, whether it's something simple of like I do vitamin IVs and like just completely unwilling to like show any reaction to like having an IV put in, or whether it's just like having a disappointment in business and completely being unwilling to show that, or whatever it is. It's just, I think it's a society. We just need to be taught like you don't have to be tough all the time, and like when you're not strong, I got you. I think that's way more important than toughen up. But so Kevin, you said you've never experienced bullying, but that you'd love to give some advice on the topic.
Well, all right. Yeah, and I wouldn't say never experienced bullying, but compared to like a lot of stories I hear, I'd say, it was minimal. I'm lucky. I went to, like good schools, where, and, was generally with peers who were accepting, and I did get picked on some. I wouldn't say I was completely immune to that. Like I got mostly, but the picking on I experienced was mostly like name call, a little bit of name calling in middle school and high school I experienced from like one or two particular, and there was like a small minority of people who would do that, like one or two. There was like maybe one kid in middle school and one kid in high school who used to call me some mean names, but that was about all I really experienced. I feel like that stands out in my school years as far with regards to bullying. And do want to say to you, Jessica, I would never know that you were scarred by, by being bullied in your school years. You seem like a very, smart, assertive, strong, woman right now, that it's hard for me to picture that you really struggle from this from lack of confidence at all, or still feel emotionally scarred by being bullied. You really don't come across that way at all, And but anyway, my views on bullying is it's definitely a very, very serious topic that needs very, very serious issue that needs to be dealt with, and that schools and generally things are getting better, but we still got a long ways to go, and we need to do a better job of addressing it, because I think an important thing to note is bullying has gone as far as resulting in suicides. There have been documented cases of people being bullying to the point where it affected their self-esteem so much that they became depressed and eventually committed suicide. And there's also the bullies who get pushed over the deep end, and they're the ones that become like the mass shooters who bring a gun and shoot people in the school. So seeing where bullying can lead, it is a very, very serious issue that definitely has to be dealt with. I think one of the big areas that I think ways I would think it needs to be better addressed is, I think, and this is coming from me as someone who went to college for teaching, is I think teachers need to be better trained on how to deal with bullies. And one thing that I remember when we talked about bullying, the topic of bullying in one of my college courses, one point that was brought up that I think is very serious is like Monica's like, it leads to what Monica was talking about, teasing versus bullying, and it's like they mentioned one quote that kind of was the quote like, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And like my college professor who really brought this quote up said that a quote is total, BS, that verbal bullying really needs to be taken just as seriously as physical bullying does, because many schools and teachers will view somebody as, beating somebody up as bullying, but not, verbal, but will dismiss verbal bullying as just harmless teasing, like say things like boys will be boys. But no, verbal bullying is really just as serious and needs to be addressed, taken much more seriously than it generally is. And I think teachers need to be trained to really, I think, both intervene, but have better intervention plans for bullying when they either witness it or get like clues that it might be going on. And also when we talk about, I think, building people up, I think that's one of the most important that's one of the really important roles of a teacher, I think, too, is building all of their students up so that everyone, really is developing that self-confidence. And like, I think that's important for parents to do, definitely too, but I think just as important for teachers, because I think like people like all good parents love their kids unconditionally, and I think sometimes in addition to hearing your parents tell you you're amazing, you need to be hearing it from like people outside of your immediate family too. Like, so teachers really telling kids you're amazing and finding like you're amazing, you're very bright, you're going to do great things, all that stuff teachers need to be trained to do with everyone too. And teachers need to also, I think, one point is in their teaching, in part of what they should be teaching is kind of fostering an environment of respect where everyone respects each other. Kind of we talked a few weeks ago about whether like dating should be taught as a class in school. Well, how about, really anti-bullying, I think, should be taught as a class in school about kids should be educated from an early age how serious of an issue bullying is, and why it's important to respect people who are different from you. I think if teachers, do a better job of teaching that, why it's important to respect people who are different from you, then that might go a long ways towards reducing the amount of bullying we see in schools.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Kevin. I think like even today, like I said to this boy, like, you're amazing. And I did it through a hangman game. And he's like, no one's ever told me that before. And I've been working, like I said, I've been working with this kid for 4 years, and the implications of him saying no one's ever told me this means I never told him that. And I do truly believe he's amazing. So I think that we need to say it more. Whether we're teachers or whether we're parents, we're right at the top of the hour. But I want to thank everyone for coming on here today and, for being part of this discussion. And if you are on here, I want to ask you on a request, and you can put in the chat if you're willing to take this on, because you never know who needs to hear it. You never know who, Kevin, I don't know where Keith comes from. Kevin, thank you for your compliments and saying you don't even see my scars. And I've worked hard to not show them, but you don't know who you're interacting with on a daily basis, who has scars that still need to be healed. So I want to challenge you to tell someone in the next 24 hours that they're amazing. So if you are here, if you're live, if you can just throw in the chat, yes, if you're willing to commit to the fact that you're going to tell somebody in the next 24 hours that they're amazing, that you think they're amazing. And if that's all that comes from this, I think that the world would be a much more beautiful place. So Jeff is saying yes, and I see Mike.
I'd like to add something.
Yes, go ahead, Rachel. I'd love to hear.
Yes, everyone's talking about dating, but I think there's too much of a pressure on autistic boys and girls to be dating. I think that in society, there's so much pressure to live a heteronormative lifestyle, especially when you're autistic. But who knows? I mean, you might love a girl or maybe multiple people or nobody. You might not have romantic feelings. So why pressure us to live in one sort of romantic mold? And I just see this with so many boys especially, and it really saddens me. So why should dating be taught in schools? Because you're going to teach it the one way, and that's just not right.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Rachel, and that actually could potentially be an entire topic for discussion next time. We briefly touched in the past episode as to whether or not dating should be taught in classes. And I would love to hear your perspective because you weren't there at that point when we talked about that. And I think you bring up some great points. And I know Aidan as well has said on this show multiple times he identifies as gay. So I would love to hear his perspective and your perspective, whether or not, that should be taught, and if so, how should it be taught? Because things are really taught from a heteronormative perspective, like you said. So I would love to have that as a topic of discussion. Hopefully maybe next week we can really dive into that. I do think that's a really, really important discussion. And also a lot of times people that are autistic don't identify as being either asexual or pansexual, or identify as in a different, and not only people are autistic, but different. I think it's becoming more common for people to accept different sexual identities. And so I think it's important we have that conversation as well. So we will definitely commit to having that conversation. But thank you for bringing that up.
Yay.
So I just want to thank everyone for being on here. If you're on here, this is another episode of Ask an Autistic, where I put together a panel of amazing people. Parents can come on, they can get their questions answered. And if there's anything that you want to come on, just jump over to my website, hopeeducationservices.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, we do this every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. You can get your questions answered in real time. So I hope to see everyone next week.